Everything felt heavy and distant for Emma Richardson, as if she was trapped underwater in an endless void of darkness. It wasn't like normal sleep where you drift peacefully. Instead, it felt like being buried alive in thick, suffocating silence, where her body refused to respond no matter how hard she tried. Sometimes she could sense a gentle touch on her hand or feel a cool breeze brushing against her skin. Other times she heard footsteps coming close before fading away into nothingness. But none of it felt completely real. Everything seemed muffled and far away, like trying to hear conversations through layers of cotton. Then one day, a voice cut through the fog with shocking clarity. The words were sharp and deliberate, spoken in a whisper that chilled her to the core. A man's voice, painfully familiar even through the haze clouding her mind, said something that made her blood run cold. He suggested ending her life, calling her worthless and claiming she was nothing but a burden now. Another voice responded, a woman's voice that was soft yet carried a cruel edge. This second voice agreed, pointing out that doctors had already given up hope and questioning why they should continue waiting. The woman asked why they were dragging things out when there seemed to be no chance of recovery. Emma heard footsteps moving around the room and the rustle of fabric as someone shifted their position. A frustrated sigh followed before the man muttered that they shouldn't be having such conversations in this location. But the woman shot back, reminding him that he was the one who brought her into the hospital room in the first place. Their voices faded again, swallowed by the overwhelming darkness that held Emma captive. She couldn't move a single muscle. Her eyes refused to open no matter how desperately she tried. Speaking was completely impossible, yet something deep inside her, some primal instinct for survival, tightened with absolute terror. These voices weren't coming from strangers. Emma would recognize them anywhere, even in her current state. They belonged to her husband, Marcus, and Jessica, the woman she had once considered one of her closest friends. What Emma couldn't hear, because she kept drifting in and out of consciousness, was the rest of their disturbing conversation. But Nurse Sarah Mitchell heard everything. She had paused right outside the doorway, holding a medication chart in her hands, planning to come in for the routine vital signs check. The moment those words reached her ears, she froze completely in her tracks. Her grip on the chart tightened until the plastic began to bend under the pressure. Sarah hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but when she heard someone casually suggest letting a patient die, she stopped breathing for a moment. She had worked as a nurse for 14 years and had witnessed family members struggle with end-of-life decisions before. However, she had never heard anyone speak about it like they were making a simple request, or even worse, like they were executing a carefully thought-out plan. She pressed herself flat against the wall, hidden just outside the room where she couldn't be seen. Marcus Richardson stood beside his wife's hospital bed, wearing the same expression that everyone at the facility had come to recognize over the past several weeks. To everyone watching, Marcus appeared to be the devoted, loving husband. He was the man who never missed a single visiting hour, who brought fresh flowers every week without fail, and who told anyone within earshot that Emma was the absolute love of his life. He had successfully charmed the nursing staff, impressed the doctors, and even won over families in the waiting room with his seemingly selfless devotion. But the voice Sarah heard now was nothing like the public version of Marcus that everyone else saw. This private Marcus was cold, calculated, and completely void of genuine emotion. Jessica stood right beside him, with her arms crossed over her chest, wearing expensive perfume that filled the small room and displaying a carefully practiced smile that never reached her eyes. She wasn't supposed to be there at all. Sarah knew that Jessica had signed in earlier claiming to be a family friend, but hospitals see enough complicated situations to recognize when someone has no legitimate business being that close to a patient. Jessica stepped even nearer to Emma's bed and looked down at her as if she were examining something old and useless that had long ago lost its value. Jessica remarked that Emma hadn't moved in several weeks, shrugging as if it meant nothing. She mentioned that doctors sometimes say the body just continues functioning while the brain remains quiet, comparing Emma to a vegetable. Jessica casually suggested that there was no point in prolonging the misery. Sarah felt her stomach twist into painful knots. Marcus rubbed his jaw the way he always did when working through something unpleasant in his mind. He explained that the insurance policy wouldn't pay out unless Emma was officially declared brain dead or passed away naturally. So he couldn't rush anything even if he wanted to. Jessica laughed quietly and pointed out that Marcus had been complaining constantly about how Emma's condition was holding up all their plans. Marcus hissed at her to lower her voice, clearly worried that someone might overhear them. But Sarah heard every single word. Emma, still trapped in her unresponsive body, didn't catch the rest of their conversation as the darkness pulled her under once again. Sarah slowly backed away from the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She felt completely unsure about what to do next. Reporting something like this based solely on overheard conversation could potentially destroy her entire career if she turned out to be wrong somehow. Marcus Richardson wasn't just any ordinary person. He had money, powerful connections, and access to expensive lawyers. He was exactly the kind of man who always seemed to get whatever he wanted, no matter what obstacles stood in his way. The next morning, when visiting hours officially began, Marcus returned to the hospital alone. He carried a cup of black coffee and wore the same fragile, sympathetic smile he had been using to gain everyone's sympathy. The volunteers working at the front desk absolutely adored him, often whispering to each other about what a wonderfully dedicated husband he was. Marcus walked into Emma's room just as Patricia, Emma's mother, was gently placing a warm hand on her daughter's arm. Patricia always talked to Emma as if she were fully awake and aware, believing it was the only real comfort she could offer during this horrible situation. Marcus stepped inside the room, cleared his throat deliberately, and waited for Patricia to notice his presence. She did notice him, but her expression wasn't welcoming. Patricia greeted him with a simple good morning that lacked any warmth. Marcus nodded in return and asked how Emma was doing that day. Patricia replied that Emma's condition remained exactly the same as it had been yesterday, then looked Marcus up and down with obvious suspicion. She mentioned that she hadn't seen him the previous night. Marcus's expression didn't change even slightly as he explained that a business meeting had run late, and he hadn't wanted to disturb Patricia if she happened to be sleeping when he finally got home. Patricia stated flatly that she hadn't been at home because she had spent the entire night right here at the hospital. A tiny crack appeared in Marcus's carefully maintained mask. Before Marcus could say anything else, Jessica walked past the doorway. She wasn't even attempting to hide her presence anymore. She drifted by with her high heels clicking loudly against the tile floor, then paused halfway down the hall and gave Marcus a small, knowing smile. Patricia's face changed instantly, her eyes narrowing with immediate suspicion. She demanded to know what Jessica was doing there and why she was looking at Marcus in that particular way. Marcus didn't turn toward Jessica. Instead, he kept his eyes fixed on Patricia and forced out a soft sigh. He claimed that Jessica was visiting her aunt, who was somewhere in the building, and had texted him earlier mentioning she was on this floor. Marcus insisted he didn't want Patricia to misunderstand the situation. Patricia said quietly that Marcus didn't need to twist his words for her benefit because she knew perfectly well when someone was lying. Marcus stepped closer to her and tried to sound reasonable, saying she was exhausted and worried, which he completely understood, but he asked her not to make the situation ugly. Patricia responded that she wasn't making anything ugly, but that woman Jessica had never set foot in this hospital before, and the way she just looked at Marcus was highly inappropriate. Marcus's tone dropped lower as he firmly told Patricia to stop talking. Sarah watched the entire exchange from the hallway, pretending to check a supply cart while observing everything. She saw Patricia wipe tears from her eyes before looking down at her daughter again. Patricia whispered that she didn't trust Jessica, and she certainly didn't trust Marcus when Jessica was anywhere nearby. Marcus didn't respond to that accusation. Instead, he walked around to the opposite side of the bed, adjusted Emma's blanket purely for show, since others might be watching, and suggested they focus on Emma instead of arguing. Sarah felt the tension in the room thickening like heavy fog rolling in. Emma's heart rate monitor continued beeping in its steady, unchanging rhythm, completely unaware of all the cracks forming in the relationships around her. Later that same afternoon, Marcus approached Dr. Reynolds near the nurse's station to have a private conversation. He quietly mentioned that he wanted to revisit the topic of Emma's living will in advance directives. Dr. Reynolds frowned and reminded Marcus that they had already reviewed those documents thoroughly. The living will clearly stated that life support could only be withdrawn after 2 completely independent neurological examinations confirmed there was absolutely no brain activity remaining. Dr. Reynolds emphasized that Emma's condition hadn't reached that point yet. Marcus leaned in closer and claimed that he and Emma had updated their paperwork several months ago. He insisted he had emailed a revised copy to the hospital and that the doctor had promised to look into it. Dr. Reynolds replied that they had indeed seen the document Marcus submitted, but there were significant inconsistencies with the signature that raised serious concerns. Marcus's jaw visibly tightened as he insisted the document was completely authentic and legally valid. Dr. Reynolds stated firmly that the medical staff wasn't convinced of that. Marcus straightened his expensive suit jacket, clearly preparing to argue further, when Jessica suddenly approached them again. She moved with the obvious confidence of someone who knew she had some kind of power over Marcus. Jessica asked lightly if they were still meeting for dinner later, completely ignoring the doctor's presence. Marcus shot her a warning look that told her to be quiet. Dr. Reynolds raised an eyebrow and asked what dinner she was referring to. Jessica realized her mistake too late and attempted to laugh it off. She quickly claimed she meant the charity fundraiser that everyone from Marcus's law firm was planning to attend, adding that she was helping organize the guest list. Sarah knew a poorly constructed lie when she heard one, and apparently so did Dr. Reynolds, though neither of them pushed the issue any further at that moment. After Jessica walked away, Marcus returned to the topic quickly. He insisted that his wife wouldn't want to be kept alive artificially with no realistic hope of recovery. Dr. Reynolds answered that Emma's actual paperwork said something completely different from what Marcus was claiming. The doctor stated clearly that if Marcus was asking the medical staff to withdraw care against established hospital protocol, he absolutely would not sign off on such a request. Marcus's polite smile became noticeably strained as he suggested the doctor find someone else who would be willing to approve his request. Sarah watched Marcus storm away from the conversation with a growing tightness in her chest. She had witnessed family members break down under the weight of grief many times during her career. But Marcus wasn't breaking down at all. Instead, he was actively pressuring staff, manipulating situations, and pushing boundaries like someone who wasn't grieving even a little bit. Over the following days, Sarah noticed more concerning signs that something was seriously wrong. Marcus arrived with Jessica more frequently, though Jessica now made a point of staying just outside the doorway, apparently trying to maintain the appearance of keeping her distance from him. Whenever anyone happened to pass by, Jessica acted as if she barely knew Marcus at all. But when they thought the hallway was completely empty, they whispered far too close together, argued in hushed voices, and touched each other in ways that no family friend ever would. Emma remained silent and still, absorbing absolutely none of what was happening around her. Patricia caught glimpses of their behavior, which was enough to trigger serious alarm bells in her mind. One evening, Patricia stepped out of Emma's room and spotted Marcus cornered by Jessica at the far end of the hallway. Jessica was touching Marcus's tie while saying something that made him laugh out loud. He leaned toward her, whispering something in response while his hand brushed against her waist in a clearly intimate gesture. Patricia gasped loudly in complete disbelief. Jessica turned around first and forced an overly sweet smile onto her face, claiming she hadn't seen Patricia standing there. Marcus straightened up instantly, his entire body language changing. Patricia's voice cracked as she demanded to know what was really going on. Marcus claimed it was just work-related, nothing more. He explained that Jessica's marketing team was handling one of his important business accounts, and they were simply going over some details. Patricia snapped back that she wasn't stupid, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Her daughter was lying in that hospital room fighting desperately for her life, and Marcus was out here doing whatever this was. Marcus hissed at Patricia to keep her voice down, clearly worried that others would hear. Patricia refused, her voice trembling but remaining strong. She said she had known something was strange for weeks now. Marcus barely visited without checking his phone every 5 minutes. He left early and arrived late to visiting hours, and now she finally understood exactly why. Jessica stepped closer to Patricia, lowering her voice into a false, soothing tone. She suggested that emotions naturally run extremely high during difficult times like these, and that they shouldn't jump to hasty conclusions. Patricia told Jessica sharply not to talk to her like she was a child who couldn't understand what was right in front of her face. Marcus grabbed Patricia's elbow, attempting to steer her away. Patricia jerked her arm back forcefully and told Marcus not to dare touch her. Sarah quickly intervened, hurrying over while pretending she had an urgent question about medication dosages. This gave Patricia an easy escape from the confrontation. Patricia thanked Sarah with her eyes before walking back into Emma's room with as much dignity as she could manage. Jessica shifted her weight from foot to foot, looking annoyed that their private moment had been interrupted. Marcus muttered something under his breath that Sarah couldn't quite catch, and then he and Jessica walked away together while whispering fiercely to each other. That night, Sarah recorded Emma's vital signs in the medical chart with a tight feeling in her throat. She kept thinking about the suspicious living will, all the half-heard conversations she had accidentally overheard, and how easily Marcus and Jessica told their lies. Sarah desperately wanted to step in somehow, to warn someone in authority, to report something concrete, but the professional rules governing nursing practice were extremely strict and unforgiving. Suspicion alone didn't count as evidence. Sarah knew nurses who had lost their licenses over much less serious situations than this. Still, something felt deeply, fundamentally wrong about everything happening around Emma Richardson. Several more days passed, and Jessica's boldness continued growing. One afternoon, Jessica casually tossed her designer purse onto the chair right beside Emma's hospital bed. She mentioned that when all of this was finally over, Marcus had promised they would take a trip somewhere warm and peaceful, somewhere far from hospitals and sick people. Marcus smirked and asked if she meant when everything was properly settled. Jessica confirmed that yes, she meant exactly that. Sarah noticed the very specific way Marcus phrased his response. He didn't say if Emma woke up or if her medical condition somehow improved. He said when everything was settled, as if Emma's death was merely a matter of completing the right paperwork and waiting for the inevitable outcome. Sarah swallowed her rising anger, turned her attention back to the monitoring equipment, and pretended she wasn't listening to their disturbing conversation. Later that same day, Sarah overheard them talking again from her position in the hallway just outside the room. Jessica was flipping through a fashion magazine while commenting that they needed to discuss Emma's personal belongings soon. Jessica specifically mentioned wanting the ring Emma never wore anymore, the beautiful one from Emma's grandmother that must be worth a small fortune. Marcus whispered that Emma wouldn't want Jessica to have that particular piece of jewelry. Jessica replied coldly that Emma didn't get to want anything anymore, so her preferences were completely irrelevant now. Marcus hesitated, saying the situation wasn't quite that simple. Jessica touched his arm and reminded him that he had made promises to her. Sarah's pulse spiked dangerously high as she processed what she was hearing. They were talking as if Emma was already dead and gone, casually dividing up her possessions like they were planning a yard sale. That evening, when Patricia arrived for her usual visit, she found Marcus alone in Emma's room. He was simply staring at his wife without showing any real emotion whatsoever. He adjusted Emma's blanket once again, performing the same meaningless gesture he always did whenever someone might be watching his behavior. Patricia stood silently by the door, her voice quiet but filled with exhaustion and pain. She told Marcus that the thing hurting her most was that she had trusted him completely. She had genuinely believed that Marcus loved her daughter with all his heart. Marcus still didn't turn around to face Patricia as he claimed that he did love Emma. Patricia said softly that Marcus loved how Emma made him look to other people, but that wasn't the same thing as actually loving her as a person. There was a significant difference between the two. Marcus's jaw clenched tightly as he told Patricia to go home and get some rest. Patricia responded that Marcus could try to order the doctors around all he wanted, but he didn't get to order her anymore. Not after everything she had witnessed. She walked slowly to Emma's bedside and gently kissed her daughter's forehead. Then Patricia whispered something so quietly that Marcus couldn't hear the words. When Patricia finally left the room, Marcus's phone immediately buzzed with an incoming message. He checked the screen, allowed himself a small smirk, and slipped out the door to meet Jessica in the hallway. Sarah entered Emma's room just a moment later to perform her regular duties. She carefully checked all of Emma's vital signs, adjusted her pillow to make her more comfortable, and then paused beside the bed. Sarah whispered that she didn't know if Emma could actually hear her words, but she wanted Emma to know she was there, and that something about this entire situation felt terribly wrong. She could feel it in her bones. The heart monitor responded with its steady, unchanging beeping pattern. Sarah gently squeezed Emma's hand and pleaded with her to please wake up. But Emma remained completely still and unresponsive. Until 1 week later, everything suddenly changed. On a quiet Wednesday morning, Sarah walked into Emma's room carrying a cup of warm water and fresh bed linens. Sunlight filtered peacefully through the window blinds, and the hallway outside was unusually calm. It was one of those rare, peaceful moments that hospital workers treasure. Sarah lifted Emma's hand carefully to change the sheet positioned beneath it. Then she froze completely, her eyes widening in shock. Emma's index finger had just twitched once, then twitched again even more clearly. Sarah's heart leaped straight into her throat. She leaned closer, staring intently at Emma's hand while holding her breath. Sarah whispered Emma's name, asking if she could hear her. The finger twitched harder this time, the movement absolutely unmistakable. Sarah gasped loudly and reached toward the emergency call button, but then she hesitated. Part of her wanted to shout down the hallway and tell everyone the incredible news. Part of her wanted to run directly to the nurse's station. But at that exact second, Marcus walked into the room unexpectedly. He stopped cold in his tracks, immediately sensing something had changed. He demanded to know what had happened. Sarah turned toward him with her voice shaking from pure shock and excitement. She told Marcus that Emma had moved, that she had actually seen movement, and she believed Emma might be coming back to consciousness. The expression that crossed Marcus's face wasn't joy or relief at all. Instead, it showed fear. Real, genuine, unmistakable fear. Pure panic slid across his eyes before he managed to force his features into something more neutral. Marcus swallowed hard and asked exactly what Emma had done. Sarah explained that Emma's finger had moved twice and she genuinely thought Emma might be waking up from the extended state. Marcus stared at his wife for a long, tense moment, then stepped toward the hospital bed far too slowly. His movements seemed unnatural and calculated. Sarah didn't like the look in his eyes at all. She quickly announced that she needed to go get Dr. Reynolds immediately because this could be the very first sign of real recovery. Sarah rushed out of the room with her heart pounding wildly. Behind her, Marcus stayed perfectly still, watching the door swing closed. Then he turned back toward Emma, and his entire expression changed into something dark and frightening. Marcus stood beside the hospital bed with both hands pressed flat against the metal rails, staring down at Emma's motionless face. The room suddenly felt smaller and more confined, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen to whatever would happen next. His breathing came out uneven and ragged, not because he was scared for Emma's well-being, but because he was terrified of what she might remember if she fully regained consciousness. He dragged his hand across his mouth nervously and muttered that this couldn't be happening now, not after everything he had carefully planned. Marcus began pacing from the foot of the bed to the window and back again, unable to stop his restless movements. Every part of his body looked agitated, but underneath the surface, anxiety was cold calculation. It was the same calculating expression Sarah had observed in him for weeks now. He looked at Emma as if she were holding a dangerous secret that could completely destroy his entire life. When Marcus finally stopped pacing around the room, he stepped close to Emma and leaned down until his lips were just inches from her ear. He whispered that if she woke up fully, she would ruin absolutely everything. She couldn't do that to him after all his efforts. Emma heard none of his threatening words, but something deep inside her consciousness stirred once more. It was a faint shift occurring beneath the heavy fog that had trapped her for so long. Marcus straightened up quickly when he heard footsteps echoing in the hospital corridor outside. Jessica appeared suddenly in the doorway, completely breathless from running. She said she had just heard from someone that Sarah claimed Emma had moved and demanded to know if it was really true. Marcus's jaw tightened visibly as he told Jessica not to repeat that information out loud where others might hear. Jessica stepped fully inside the room and shut the door firmly behind her. She insisted that if Emma woke up right now, everything they had worked toward would be completely finished. Marcus tried to sound reassuring by suggesting that Emma might not remember anything that happened before her accident. Jessica hissed back, asking if Marcus really wanted to take that kind of enormous risk. Did he want to gamble on the possibility that Emma might tell someone about their fights, about the financial fraud, about their affair and all the planning they had done together? Marcus clenched both fists tightly and told Jessica to stop talking immediately. Jessica grabbed his arm forcefully and reminded him that if Emma woke up and started talking to investigators, his entire life would be done. The business would collapse, the money would disappear, and his reputation would be destroyed forever. Marcus would lose absolutely everything he valued. Marcus looked at Jessica, then back at Emma lying helplessly in the bed. The panic in his eyes flickered dangerously again. Jessica stepped even closer, lowering her voice to a sharp, urgent whisper. She told Marcus they had exactly one chance to handle the situation correctly, and he absolutely could not mess it up now. Before Marcus could answer her, Sarah's voice echoed from somewhere in the hallway. She was calling out that Dr. Reynolds was on his way upstairs and wanted to examine Emma immediately. Jessica's fingers slipped quickly from Marcus's arm. She told him they needed to leave right now, and that he should go play the role of worried husband or whatever performance he usually did. She specifically warned him not to let the doctor think Emma's condition was genuinely improving. Marcus hesitated, asking what would happen if Emma woke up completely while he was gone from the room. Jessica whispered back grimly that he should pray Emma couldn't speak yet if that happened. Then Jessica slipped silently out the door and disappeared down the corridor. Marcus waited until her footsteps had completely faded before following her out. He stepped into the hall just as Dr. Reynolds approached with his usual businesslike manner. The doctor nodded briefly in greeting, but kept walking purposefully toward Emma's room. Marcus didn't follow the doctor back inside. Instead, he lingered near the nurse's station, pacing nervously back and forth. His eyes kept flicking toward the hallway every few seconds, watching and waiting anxiously. Inside the treatment room, Dr. Reynolds examined Emma extremely carefully. Sarah stood right beside him, with her heart pounding with genuine hope for the first time in weeks. She insisted that it had been definite, purposeful movement, not just a random muscle spasm. Sarah explained she had witnessed plenty of involuntary twitches during her nursing career, and this was completely different from those. Dr. Reynolds said calmly that he believed her account. His voice remained professional and measured, but his eyes scanned Emma's face with intense concentration. He lifted her hand carefully, checked her reflexes thoroughly, then watched her eyelids for any subtle changes. The doctor murmured Emma's name and asked her to try moving her fingers again if she could hear him speaking. For a long moment, absolutely nothing happened. The heart monitor continued its steady beeping rhythm. Sarah held her breath and prayed silently. Then Emma's index finger twitched again. The movement was tiny and weak, but completely unmistakable to anyone watching closely. Sarah gasped with relief and pointed at Emma's hand. Dr. Reynolds straightened up immediately and said they needed to run new diagnostic scans right away. They would increase neurological monitoring significantly and notify the family members about this positive development. He stopped speaking abruptly when he noticed Marcus standing in the doorway with a face that had gone pale and utterly unreadable. Marcus spoke quietly, pointing out that the staff had said Emma moved. Dr. Reynolds nodded, still unaware of any tension in the room. He explained that this could very well be the first real sign of Emma emerging from and that they were preparing comprehensive new evaluations to assess her condition properly. Marcus stepped inside the room slowly and deliberately. He commented that the development sounded promising, but his tone lacked any genuine enthusiasm. Sarah, however, noticed the small muscle in Marcus's jaw flexing repeatedly, which was a clear sign he felt anything but relieved by this news. Dr. Reynolds didn't pick up on the tension. He immediately began giving orders to his staff, speaking information into his electronic tablet, and calling the neurologist who was currently on duty. Nurses arrived quickly with specialized equipment, updating monitors, adjusting tubes, and checking intravenous lines. The room became busy and full of purposeful movement and renewed hope for Emma's recovery. Marcus stayed in the corner of the room with his eyes glued to Emma, not blinking once. When all the medical examinations were finally completed, Dr. Reynolds turned to Sarah with final instructions. He told her to keep an extremely close watch on Emma and to page him immediately if she showed any additional signs of returning consciousness. Sarah confirmed she would do exactly that. The medical staff left one by one until only Sarah and Marcus remained in the room. Sarah approached Marcus slowly and told him she knew this must feel overwhelming, but emphasized that this was genuinely good news. She reminded Marcus that his wife might actually be coming back to him. Marcus didn't smile at all. He didn't thank Sarah for her care. He didn't say even a single word in response. Instead, he just stared at Emma as if he were calculating something complicated in his head. Sarah felt her skin prickle with unease. Something felt wrong here. Deeply and fundamentally wrong about Marcus's reaction. Marcus finally broke his silence and asked if Sarah thought Emma could hear them yet. Sarah hesitated before answering that it was certainly possible, explaining that patients sometimes hear voices around them before fully waking. Marcus nodded once, far too controlled in his response. He said he understood now. Then he asked if Emma was truly aware, and whether she could potentially remember anything that had been said around her during the days. Sarah couldn't provide a definite answer, but every professional instinct told her this conversation was dangerous territory. She admitted she wasn't entirely sure how much Emma might recall, then suggested that Marcus should just talk to his wife the way he normally would. Marcus said he would do that, but something in his tone made Sarah deeply uncomfortable. Sarah forced a small smile even though her stomach was knotting itself painfully. She told Marcus she would be right outside in the hallway if he needed anything at all. Sarah stepped out of the treatment room, deliberately leaving the door open behind her for safety reasons. Marcus didn't move from his position initially. He waited patiently until Sarah had walked several steps away down the corridor. Then the door suddenly creaked and swung shut. Sarah stopped walking immediately and turned around in confusion. She definitely hadn't closed that door herself. Marcus must have reached back and pushed it closed after she left. A bad feeling settled over Sarah like a heavy, uncomfortable weight. It was the kind of intuitive warning she had learned never to ignore during her years working around family members who acted far too calm during crisis situations. Sarah stepped closer to the closed door, with her hand lifting as if to open it and check on her patient. But just at that moment, another nurse called her name urgently from further down the hall, pulling her attention away. Sarah looked back at Emma's closed door one more time, feeling increasingly worried. Something definitely wasn't right about any of this. Inside the room, Marcus stood at Emma's bedside, breathing hard and fast. The mask of the devoted, loving husband had slipped away entirely now that absolutely no one else was present to witness his real feelings. Marcus sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. For a moment, he simply studied Emma's face like a man staring at a problem he desperately wished would solve itself. He reached out slowly, brushing her hair back from her forehead with a touch that was far too careful to be genuine affection. Marcus whispered that Emma wasn't supposed to wake up at all. She wasn't supposed to still be fighting for survival like this. The room felt noticeably colder. Emma didn't move again, but her breathing pattern shifted just slightly, becoming a tiny bit stronger. Marcus's eyes flicked quickly to the monitoring equipment, then back to Emma's face. He told her that if she woke up and started talking to people, everything he had built would disappear instantly. He asked if she understood that simple fact. Emma gave no sign of hearing him. Marcus leaned even closer, his voice tightening with barely controlled emotion. He said Emma should have just let go and stopped fighting. A long, heavy silence stretched between them in the small room. Then Marcus stood up from the chair and walked behind the hospital bed. He reached down toward the storage shelf located beneath the medical supply tray. His hands slid along the lower edge until his fingers touched something heavy and solid, something that definitely wasn't meant to be in anyone's hands in this situation. Marcus wrapped his fingers around the object tightly. Just then, the sound of the door. Marcus glanced toward the door, then back at Emma. No one else was in the room with them. His grip tightened even more around the heavy object he had found. Darkness continued holding Emma prisoner, but the edges of that darkness were definitely thinner now than before. The heavy fog felt stretched like worn fabric that was ready to tear completely. Various sounds pressed through the dimness in short, scattered bursts. She heard shuffling shoes, a quick inhale of breath, the soft clatter of something being set down nearby. All of it blurred together until one sound cut through much harder than the rest. Someone was breathing fast, uneven, and panicked. It was Marcus's breathing. She somehow knew. Emma sank closer to the surface of consciousness than she had been in weeks. She was just close enough to feel the faint tremor returning to her fingers. She desperately wanted to move them again, to reach out somehow, to pull herself completely out of the suffocating fog. But her body remained heavy and pinned down, as if it belonged to someone else. The monitoring equipment beside her hospital bed began beeping faster than normal. The change wasn't loud or frantic yet, but it was quick enough for Marcus to notice immediately. Marcus cursed under his breath and whispered urgently that this couldn't happen now. Emma heard the faint scraping sound of him stepping back quickly, as if distance alone would somehow erase whatever he had been planning to do with that hidden object behind the bed. She could almost sense him turning toward the door, trying desperately to decide whether to stay in the room or run before anyone caught him. Then footsteps approached rapidly. Sarah's voice came next, breaking through the tension like a sharp snap cutting through fog. Sarah demanded to know what Marcus was doing inside the room with the door shut and locked. Marcus moved extremely fast, too fast for someone who was supposedly just checking on his wife. Emma felt a sudden shift of air as he stepped away quickly from her bedside. Marcus stammered that he was simply checking on Emma and that he had lost his balance and grabbed onto the back of the bed to steady himself. Sarah must have glanced around carefully because her footsteps paused in a cautious manner. She commented that everything seemed fine in the room. She reminded Marcus that Dr. Reynolds still wanted more diagnostic scans performed soon. Sarah came closer to the bed. Emma felt her gentle hand touch her wrist to check her pulse. Sarah noted that Emma's pulse was significantly elevated from normal. Marcus said quickly that Emma's heart rate had done that earlier too, suggesting maybe it was nothing to worry about. Sarah didn't answer him immediately. Emma imagined the nurse narrowing her eyes suspiciously, clearly not buying Marcus's explanation at all. Sarah asked directly if Emma had moved again while Marcus was alone with her. Marcus hesitated noticeably before answering that no, he hadn't seen any movement whatsoever. Sarah brushed Emma's hair back gently and spoke directly to her patient. She told Emma that if she could hear anything being said, she wanted Emma to know she was safe now. They were all watching over her carefully. Then Sarah turned to Marcus and told him firmly that if anything changed with Emma's condition at all, he needed to come get her immediately. Marcus agreed that of course he would do that. Sarah left the room, but made sure to leave the door standing open this time. Marcus didn't move for a long moment, as if he were afraid someone might come back and catch him doing something he shouldn't be doing. Emma drifted away again, sinking back into the darkness in the muffled world. When she rose closer to waking consciousness again at some point later, the room had changed somehow. Someone was sitting near her, breathing quietly while flipping through pages of something, probably a magazine. It was Jessica. Emma recognized the sound of her bracelets first. That faint metallic tapping noise Jessica always made whenever she moved her arm in certain ways. It used to annoy Emma during their girls' nights out together. But Emma had never said anything about it because Jessica liked getting attention, and the bracelets helped her achieve that. Now each tiny click scraped painfully across Emma's nerves. Jessica sighed loudly, sounding completely bored with the situation. She muttered sarcastically that Emma really had to pick the most dramatic possible time to twitch and show signs of life. Jessica complained that Emma was always causing problems, even while unconscious. Emma couldn't react physically, but her thoughts tightened and coiled like a spring ready to snap. Jessica kept talking casually while flipping another page. She complained that Marcus was a complete mess because of Emma. Jessica swore that if Emma ruined everything they had carefully planned together, there would be serious consequences. She stopped talking abruptly. More footsteps were approaching from the hallway. It was Marcus returning. Jessica spoke in a low, urgent whisper, and asked if Emma had moved again, noting that Marcus looked like he had just seen a ghost. Marcus's voice came out thin and strained. He admitted he wasn't completely sure about Emma's condition. He mentioned that Sarah had almost caught him doing something earlier in the day. Jessica hissed back, demanding to know what exactly Marcus had been caught doing. Marcus snapped back that it was nothing important. Jessica lowered her voice even further and reminded Marcus that he was supposed to be extremely careful about his actions. Marcus whispered back defensively that he was being careful, but Emma kept reacting to things. He said it felt like Emma somehow knew something was wrong. Jessica stated firmly that Emma couldn't possibly know anything because she was basically half dead. Emma heard Marcus exhale shakily in response. Continue. 9:32 a.m., he told Jessica that Emma had definitely moved. Jessica froze completely and demanded to know what he meant. Marcus explained that he had seen Emma's hand move twice, and when he came back after Dr. Reynolds' examination, her breathing pattern had changed again as well. Jessica stood up quickly. Her bracelets chimed loudly in the quiet room. She said they needed to be completely ready for what might happen next. If Emma woke up and started talking to investigators, everything would fall apart. Marcus cut her off sharply and told her not to say things like that, especially not here in the hospital. Jessica lowered her voice but insisted they both knew exactly what was at stake. A tense silence stretched tight and sharp between them. Emma felt herself sinking slightly as the fog tried pulling her down again. But their voices still filtered through clearly enough. Jessica spoke first, asking if Marcus remembered the night Emma had found all the text messages between them. Marcus groaned and told Jessica not to bring up that particular night. Jessica continued anyway, reminding him that he had practically begged her to help him deal with the situation. Jessica said Marcus had told her repeatedly that Emma didn't understand him at all, that Emma was holding him back from achieving his full potential. Marcus didn't bother denying any of it. Jessica went on, describing how when Emma finally confronted Marcus about the affair, he had completely lost control of his temper. Jessica recounted that Marcus had told Emma she never fit in properly with his friends, never dressed the right way, and never sounded like she belonged in his social circle. Marcus had apparently told Emma that she embarrassed him constantly. Emma's pulse jumped significantly. The monitor started beeping faster in response. She remembered fragments of that horrible night now. There had been a hallway argument, raised voices echoing. Her car keys clutched in her hand as she tried to leave the house. She remembered Marcus grabbing her arm hard enough to leave painful bruises that lasted for days. Jessica caught the rising beeps coming from the monitoring equipment. She pointed out urgently that Emma's monitor was reacting, and she was clearly responding to their conversation. Marcus insisted it was just a coincidence and nothing more. Jessica whispered harshly that Marcus was being an idiot. She warned that if Emma woke up now and started talking, they would both be completely finished. Emma fell downward again into unconsciousness, not fully knocked out, but definitely farther from the surface than before. Voices stretched and twisted like echoes bouncing through the heavy fog surrounding her. Jessica was still talking, reminding Marcus that he had been cheating on Emma long before she ever figured anything out. Jessica claimed Marcus had told her he only married Emma in the first place because she was easy to control and manipulate. Marcus swore and told Jessica to stop talking immediately. Jessica pushed further, saying Marcus had complained that Emma would get in the way of his important promotion at work. Marcus raised his voice and told Jessica to be quiet. Emma fought hard against the pull of blackness, trying desperately to climb toward their words. She needed to hear everything. She needed to remember all of it. The final argument before her accident came back to her in jagged, painful flashes. Emma remembered herself shouting angrily, then Marcus shouting even louder. She remembered tires squealing on wet pavement, and then a sharp snapping sound. Then absolutely nothing after that. Her body shivered weakly, though barely noticeably. Jessica lowered her voice and told Marcus fine, but not to pretend he was innocent in any of this. She reminded him that he had specifically asked her to help push Emma away from all her friends. Jessica said Marcus had made sure Emma stopped going to her book club meetings and stopped meeting up with that coworker she really liked. Marcus had deliberately cut Emma off from everyone in her support network. Emma felt that accusation like a knife stabbing through her. She remembered clearly now how lonely she had become over the past year, how isolated from everyone, how confused about why her friendships kept falling apart. Every small shift in her relationship suddenly made perfect sense now. Marcus whispered that Jessica was acting like he was the only villain in this situation. He pointed out that Jessica had been part of all of this from the very beginning. Jessica scoffed at that and told him to please spare her the guilt trip. She said Marcus chose this life for himself. He had chased after her aggressively, and now he wanted to blame her for his own decisions. Marcus told her to keep her voice down before someone heard them. Jessica moved closer to Marcus. Emma could feel the shift of air pressure in the small room. Jessica whispered that if Emma woke up, all their carefully constructed lies would fall apart instantly. Marcus murmured back, asking what would happen if Emma stayed exactly like this forever. Jessica didn't answer that question. Emma's world dimmed once again as the fog thickened around her consciousness. Some amount of time passed, though Emma couldn't tell if it was minutes or hours. She drifted back up toward awareness. The room was much quieter now. Only one person remained nearby. It was her mother, Patricia. Patricia's voice cracked with soft tears as she held Emma's hand tightly. She said she didn't know what was happening anymore or what to believe, but she was here trying her best. Patricia begged Emma to please come back to her. Emma tried with everything she had to squeeze her mother's hand. Nothing moved at all. Patricia let out a shaky breath and continued talking. She mentioned that Marcus kept saying Emma might be improving, but every time Patricia asked questions about the medical situation, Marcus shut her out completely. Patricia said Marcus had told Dr. Reynolds that she was too emotional to visit for long periods. She asked Emma if she could believe Marcus was making major decisions, as if Patricia didn't matter at all. Emma wanted desperately to rise up, to wake completely, to speak and tell her mother everything. But the fog held her tight and refused to let go. Patricia whispered that she knew something was wrong. She could feel it deep in her bones. She just couldn't get close enough to the truth to figure out Emma's forehead tenderly and whispered one more plea for Emma to fight her way back. When Patricia finally left the room, everything fell silent again. Emma drifted away once more. More time passed in that timeless way. Emma surfaced enough to hear two nurses whispering quietly near the doorway. One nurse mentioned that she had tried to give Patricia another hour of visiting time, but Marcus had shut that down very quickly. The other nurse replied quietly that Marcus was controlling absolutely everything about Emma's care. The second nurse asked if the first had seen the paperwork Marcus filed, requesting specific sedation protocols. The first nurse confirmed she had seen it and noted that Marcus wanted Emma kept calm, but the dosage level he was requesting was practically at the same level used for patients recovering from major surgery. The first nurse said Marcus claimed it was for Emma's comfort. The second nurse repeated the word comfort with obvious skepticism, saying she wasn't sure that's what Marcus really wanted at all. Emma felt a weak spark of fear shoot through her. She slipped away again, floating in and out of awareness, still trapped under layers of medically induced sleep she couldn't control. When she next surfaced toward consciousness, Marcus was alone with her again. Emma caught fragments of his voice saying he just needed more time. He insisted Emma couldn't wake up yet because he would lose everything he had worked for. Emma's pulse spiked in response. Marcus paused, clearly listening to the heart monitor's alarm. He whispered, asking if Emma could hear him. He said some part of her must hear every word he spoke. Emma couldn't answer, but she knew with absolute certainty that he was right. A moment later, Marcus left the room. The air shifted and the room went still. Emma hung suspended somewhere between worlds now, more aware than she had been before, but still completely unable to open her eyes or move her lips. The fear inside her was sharper now, no longer distant or muted. Emma knew she wasn't imagining the danger surrounding her. She knew she wasn't misreading the tension in Marcus's voice. Marcus genuinely didn't want her to wake up, and Jessica didn't want Emma alive at all. The fog thickened again, pulling Emma under just as another pair of footsteps entered the room. Sarah whispered that Emma was fighting hard. She said she could feel Emma's determination. Sarah pleaded with Emma to please keep going, and not let Marcus and Jessica stop her progress. Emma sank into the darkness again. The next time she rose to the surface, the world felt noticeably closer and clearer than before. Voices weren't distant anymore at all. They were right beside her bed. Jessica and Marcus were arguing again. Jessica told Marcus he needed to make a decision right now because he couldn't stall anymore. Marcus insisted he was handling the situation. Jessica shot back that he wasn't handling it fast enough. She warned that if Emma woke up, Emma would definitely talk to authorities. Jessica snapped that Marcus might be able to convince the doctors he was just a grieving husband, but he would never convince the police of that story. Marcus's voice cracked as he told Jessica to keep her voice down. Jessica said she was serious about the danger they faced. They were running out of time to act. Emma's breathing grew more shallow. Their words weren't blurry or muffled now. They were clear, sharp, and absolutely terrifying. Emma tried desperately to move her hand. Nothing happened. She tried to force her eyes open. They wouldn't budge. Her mind screamed against the silence trapping her. Emma clung to consciousness, desperate to hear every single word they said. Jessica lowered her voice significantly and reminded Marcus that he had promised the car accident would end things cleanly. She said Marcus had sworn he fixed the brake system correctly. Jessica warned that if Emma woke up and remembered anything at all about that night, they were both finished. Emma's heart hammered wildly. The monitor beeps came much faster now. Marcus cursed under his breath and told Jessica to stop talking because someone would hear them. Jessica snapped back that Marcus needed to do something decisive. The monitor beeped again, even louder this time. Emma's awareness flickered like a dying flame struggling against the wind. She slipped back into the blackness with her heart racing, knowing now, without any doubt, that she had never been safe around Marcus. Emma floated in complete darkness for what felt like a very long time. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't silent. The void was crowded with half-formed memories, fragments of bitter arguments, and the echo of Jessica's voice saying Marcus had promised the accident would end things cleanly, over and over like a broken record player. The fog surrounding Emma thinned again, and the world gradually sharpened. A cold rush of awareness moved through her entire body. Something inside Emma, some stubborn will to survive, refused to sink back down again. She pushed upward toward consciousness with everything she had left. A faint sound reached her first. She heard soft footsteps, papers shuffling quietly, and a plastic cup being set down nearby. Emma tried to move her hand. This time her fingers twitched more clearly than before. It was a slow but deliberate movement. Then a tiny gasp came from someone nearby. Sarah whispered in shock that Emma was waking up. She called Emma's name repeatedly. Emma wanted to answer desperately. She strained against her heavy eyelids, pushing against them with all her strength. They didn't open, but they trembled visibly. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She encouraged Emma to come back and follow her voice. Emma tried harder than she ever had. A wave of exhaustion pulled at her, but she fought against it more fiercely than before. She felt the faint sensation of her lips trying to part and her throat tightening as she attempted to make some kind of sound. Nothing came out yet. Still, Sarah squeezed Emma's hand gently and said she knew Emma was in there fighting. She had known it all along. The door creaked open behind Sarah. She turned sharply to see who was entering. Dr. Reynolds walked in quickly, glancing between the monitoring equipment and Emma's face. He murmured that Emma's vital signs were definitely improving and her reflexes were increasing significantly. Dr. Reynolds said this was it. Emma was emerging from her state. Sarah looked proud, a little relieved, and quietly terrified for reasons she hadn't dared to say out loud to anyone yet. Dr. Reynolds announced he would order another complete neurological evaluation and reduce the sedation medications Emma was receiving. Emma felt something change inside her brain, like a thick, suffocating blanket being slowly lifted away. Light began seeping through the cracks of darkness surrounding her. She clung to that light desperately. Dr. Reynolds instructed Sarah to keep stimulating Emma. He emphasized that she was fighting hard to come back. Sarah nodded and told Emma she heard that, didn't she? Emma was doing it. She was waking up. When Dr. Reynolds and the other staff members left the room, Emma drifted again, but not fully this time. She hovered very near the surface, close enough to hear footsteps outside the room, hurried voices, phones ringing, and someone paging Dr. Reynolds over the hospital's overhead announcement system. Then Emma heard Marcus's voice. It was tight with barely controlled emotion. Marcus demanded to know why he wasn't called first about Emma's changing condition. Dr. Reynolds replied patiently that Marcus's wife was slowly regaining consciousness, which was genuinely good news for everyone. Marcus repeated the words good news in a completely hollow tone. He asked if the doctor was absolutely sure. Dr. Reynolds confirmed that positive signs were always good for patients. Marcus said, right, of course, in a voice that lacked any real emotion. His tone was flat, controlled, and thinking far too hard about something. Emma recognized that particular tone instantly. It was the voice Marcus used when he was planning something carefully. Marcus and the doctor walked away together, their voices fading gradually. Jessica's sharper whisper wasn't far behind them. She hissed urgently, asking what would happen if Emma woke up completely. Marcus didn't answer her question. Sarah returned to Emma's room soon after, humming quietly as she checked vital signs. Emma focused everything she had on that sound, using it like a rope to pull herself upward toward full consciousness. Her eyelids felt lighter than before. Her throat felt extremely dry but responsive. Emma tried once more to move her lips. They parted just a fraction. Sarah gasped loudly. She encouraged Emma to keep going, saying that was exactly what they wanted to see. Emma strained, giving absolutely everything she had left. She tried again, harder this time. Her eyelids lifted just a tiny sliver. Sarah clapped a hand over her mouth in shock. She told Emma she had opened her eyes and she was coming back. Emma's eyes closed again instantly because the light was far too sharp and the effort was too much. But the movement had been completely real. Sarah whispered close to tears that Emma was coming back, and she was right there with her. For the first time since the accident, Emma felt genuinely hopeful. She was weak, fragile, and still trapped, but she was hopeful. Several hours passed. People came and went from the room. Nurses checked on Emma repeatedly. Dr. Reynolds asked questions Emma couldn't answer yet. Patricia cried over Emma's hand, praying out loud and thanking whoever was listening that her daughter was fighting so hard. Emma's eyes fluttered again. This time she managed to keep them open noticeably longer. The world around her was blurry but undeniably real. She could see cold hospital lights above her, shadows of machines, and the outline of Sarah nearby with wide, hopeful eyes. Sarah whispered for Emma to take her time because she was safe now. The words soothed Emma. She blinked slowly, trying to ground herself in reality. Sounds were sharper now, her breathing was steadier, and her awareness was fuller. Emma still couldn't move much or speak yet, but she could see, she could hear, she could think. And she remembered everything. Marcus cheating, Jessica laughing, the cruel insults, the lies, the sabotage breaks, the crash, the funeral planning, the whispers suggesting they let her die. Everything rose inside Emma like fire. When Sarah saw Emma trembling, she touched her arm delicately and told her not to push herself yet, because she was still too weak. Sarah said she would get the doctor and asked Emma to just rest for a minute. Sarah slipped out quickly. Emma lay there alone, breathing shallowly, forcing her tired eyes to stay open. Her body felt like wet cement, heavy and completely uncooperative, but her mind was racing frantically. Emma needed to protect herself. She needed to remember everything. She needed to stay awake. Emma had just enough strength now to stay conscious, but nowhere near enough to defend herself. That terrified her more than the darkness ever had. Seconds later, Emma heard footsteps. They were heavy ones, slow ones. Marcus. Emma's pulse spiked dangerously. Marcus stepped inside the room holding a thick folder. Emma saw the papers inside, dozens of them, thick and official looking. His eyes went straight to her face. He froze completely. The shock on his face was instant and overwhelming. His mouth fell open. His fingers tightened around the folder until the papers bent. He stared at Emma like he was staring at a ghost. Emma held his gaze, barely, weakly, but she held it. Her throat tightened painfully. Her lips trembled. She gathered every tiny bit of strength she had left. Her mouth parted slowly. The faintest whisper of a word formed on her lips. She asked why. The word was barely audible, broken, fragile, but clear enough. Marcus staggered back a step. For a split second, real fear flashed in his eyes. Raw, naked fear. Then something much darker replaced it. Cold calculation. His chest rose slowly as he forced a calm smile onto his face. He stepped closer to Emma's bed with his eyes sharpening, with a focus she knew too well. He lifted the folder in his hand, the transfer papers, and said in a soft, dangerous voice that it looked like they needed to talk. Marcus didn't blink when a nurse walked into the room, saw him hovering over Emma's bed with tears in his eyes, and gasped softly like she was witnessing a miracle of love. Marcus turned toward her immediately, wiping an imaginary tear from his cheek. He whispered shakily that Emma had opened her eyes. He said he couldn't believe it. He thought he had lost her forever. His voice cracked perfectly. Too perfectly. The nurse's hand flew to her chest. She told Marcus this was incredible, and that Emma was so lucky to have him by her side. Marcus bowed his head like he was humbled by the comment. He said he would have stayed forever if he had to, because Emma was his whole world. Emma wanted to scream. She felt her chest tighten with rage she couldn't release. She could barely move, could barely breathe without pain. And Marcus stood there playing grieving husband like he hadn't been planning her funeral weeks ago. The nurse squeezed his arm sympathetically. She said Marcus had been so devoted and that everyone talked about it at the nurse's station all the time. Emma's stomach twisted. Her monitor beeped a little faster. Marcus noticed, glanced down at Emma, and the mask flickered back into place. He murmured softly, leaning close enough that the nurse couldn't see his eyes harden. He told Emma she was safe now. He was here. Emma knew that voice. It was the one Marcus used on dinner guests when he wanted to charm his way out of awkward questions. It wasn't affection. It was pure performance. When the nurse left, Marcus stayed. He dabbed at his eyes again like he expected applause. He whispered, looking at Emma awake and helpless at the same time. He said she couldn't have timed it worse. Emma tried to turn her head, but her neck barely moved. Her muscles trembled with effort. Marcus saw the tiny motion and smiled. He murmured that she should be careful because someone might think she was trying to talk. Emma wanted to claw his face open with her bare hands. A soft knock broke the moment. Sarah stepped in. Her face lit up when she saw Emma awake again. She asked how long Emma had been alert. Marcus answered before Sarah could speak, saying Emma had just woken a minute ago. Sarah frowned. She pointed out that actually Emma was awake earlier too. She had seen Emma's eyes open before. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone warm. He agreed that yes, of course. But Emma had drifted off again. Sarah stepped around Marcus to check the monitors. She told Emma to blink if she could hear her. Emma blinked once, slow, heavy, but intentional. Sarah smiled, relieved. She said that was good. Marcus stepped closer, blocking Sarah's view a little. He suggested that Emma shouldn't get overstimulated because they didn't want to overwhelm her. Sarah's eyes narrowed at him. She reminded him that stimulating patients is part of the waking process. Marcus said softly that, still, they shouldn't push Emma too hard. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but a voice from the hall called her name. She gave Emma a worried glance before stepping out. When Sarah left, Marcus leaned down again, whispering that the more Emma woke up, the more she ruined for herself. Emma's breath hitched. Marcus smiled like they were sharing a private joke. Hours later, after several nurses came and went, all praising Marcus's devotion, Sarah returned looking visibly shaken. She closed the door halfway and spoke in a whisper. She told Emma she needed to stay calm because something was going on. Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted Emma's pillow. Sarah explained that her supervisor had pulled her aside. Marcus had filed a complaint against her. Emma's eyes widened. Sarah continued that Marcus was claiming Sarah had been interfering with his decisions. He said Sarah had created a hostile environment for the family and that she had overstepped medical boundaries. Emma's heart pounded, weak but fast. Sarah said she wasn't losing her job over this, so she had to be careful, but she was not abandoning Emma. She brushed Emma's hand lightly, a silent promise. Then the door swung open again. It was Patricia. Emma's mother looked exhausted, eyes puffy from crying, hair hastily pulled back like she'd been rushing from somewhere. Patricia breathed that Emma was awake and really awake this time. She hurried to Emma's side. Emma felt tears pricking her eyes. She blinked, slow but deliberate. Patricia held Emma's hand gently and whispered that she had been praying for this. Marcus slipped in behind Patricia like a shadow. He told the nurses nearby that he had called Patricia as soon as Emma started waking up. That was a lie. Emma knew it, but Patricia didn't. She turned to Marcus and said they needed to talk now. Marcus frowned. He told Patricia this wasn't the time. Patricia stood, her hands shaking. She said Marcus had been controlling everything and hiding things. She was done staying quiet. Marcus's eyes chilled. He told Patricia that if she had something to say, she should say it. Patricia reached into her bag and pulled out papers, printed emails. She said she had gotten these today from Marcus's lawyer. Patricia held up the emails and explained that they were supposedly from Emma saying she wanted to divorce Marcus, that she was unhappy, that she didn't trust Patricia anymore, and that she didn't want Patricia involved in her life. Emma's heart slammed painfully. She wondered what emails Patricia was talking about. Patricia's voice cracked. She begged Marcus to tell her these weren't real. Marcus let out a soft, sad sigh and rubbed his temples. He told Patricia he didn't want her to find out this way. Emma wanted to scream. She blinked 3 rapid times, trying to signal her mother that it was a lie. But Patricia wasn't looking at Emma. She was staring at Marcus. Marcus said softly that Emma was talking to a divorce attorney. He claimed Emma said she didn't want to hurt Patricia, so she planned to distance herself. Marcus added that Emma felt ashamed of how dependent Patricia had been on her. Patricia gasped. She looked shattered. Emma blinked frantically. Slow, fast, anything. Marcus placed a comforting hand on Patricia's shoulder. He said he didn't want to bring this up now, but Patricia needed to understand. Emma wasn't the person Patricia remembered. Patricia backed away from Marcus. She said she didn't know what to believe. Marcus gently guided her toward the door. He told Patricia to go home and rest. He said when Patricia was calmer, they could talk. Patricia whispered no, shaking her head, tears spilling. She kept saying no. Marcus said please, his voice soft and saintly for the watching staff. He asked to let him take care of Emma. Patricia stumbled out, crying, her hand pressed to her mouth. Emma's heart broke. Marcus turned back toward Emma. He whispered that Emma was welcome. The next morning, after a restless night of drifting in and out of awareness, Emma sensed someone entering with slow, confident steps. Jessica. She stood alone in the doorway, smiling like she was visiting an old friend recovering from a cold. Jessica said to look at Emma, awake and still pathetic. Emma's pulse raced. Jessica slipped inside, closing the door gently behind her. She told Emma not to worry because Marcus was handling everything. He always does. Jessica strolled to the bedside, examining her nails. She said Marcus told her Emma tried to talk, that Emma mouthed a word when he came in. Jessica called it adorable and asked what Emma had said. Did she say why, how, or help? Emma's fingers trembled. Jessica said to let her guess. She leaned in close, her perfume sharp and sugary. Jessica said Emma realized Marcus was leaving her. Emma realized Marcus and Jessica were getting married. Emma's eyes widened. Jessica whispered gleefully that, yes, that was true. She said Marcus proposed with the ring he originally bought for her before he chickened out and married Emma. Emma felt something break inside her. Jessica's smile widened. She told Emma not to feel too bad. Emma was never right for Marcus. She was small, ordinary, a burden Marcus carried to look stable. Marcus told Jessica that. Emma blinked tears. Jessica mused about Emma's accident. She said it was funny how it happened right after Emma found the text messages, wasn't it? Emma's breath caught. The monitor beeped faster. Jessica smirked. She said maybe Emma lost control. Maybe the rain did it. Or maybe she tilted her head with false innocence. Maybe Marcus didn't want a messy divorce. Emma stared at her, horrified. Jessica whispered for Emma to relax. She said she wasn't saying Marcus did anything. She was just saying brakes fail all the time. Emma's blood ran cold. Jessica tapped the bed rail lightly. She said, "Hey, Emma was alive for now." She leaned close enough that Emma felt her breath on her cheek. Jessica told Emma if she woke up wrong, said the wrong thing, Emma's mother might end up in a similar accident. Did Emma understand? Emma's heart plummeted. Jessica's smile turned vicious. She said, "Good talk." Jessica gave a playful little wave and walked out. Emma lay there shattered, her body frozen, her mind spiraling. For the first time since waking up, Emma wondered if surviving had been a mistake, if coming back meant only more pain, more danger, more helplessness. Emma drifted into a shaky half-sleep, drowning in fear. Hours later, she woke to the sound of someone entering softly. Sarah. She looked around as if making sure no one else was watching. Then she leaned close to Emma and slipped something small and metal into her palm. A tiny recorder. Sarah whispered, trembling. She told Emma that tomorrow, she was telling Emma something Marcus never wanted her to know. Emma tried to squeeze the recorder. She couldn't, but she held it. Sarah squeezed Emma's shoulder and hurried out. Emma lay still, heart pounding, terrified and hopeful at the same time. Then evening came. The hallway quieted, the building dimmed. A flicker of lights flashed overhead. Emma felt cold air wash through the room. Footsteps approached, slow, heavy. Marcus. He walked in without a sound. He closed the door behind him. It clicked. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across Emma. Marcus whispered that they should have buried Emma when they had the chance. He reached for Emma's IV line. The room felt too small for both of them, too dark, too quiet. Even the monitor seemed to sense danger, its beeps stretching thin between each second. Emma tried to control her breathing, but fear tightened around her chest until every inhale felt like a fight. Marcus stepped closer, the soles of his shoes whispering across the tile. He stared down at Emma like she wasn't a person at all, but a problem he had been trying to solve for months. Marcus murmured softly that Emma certainly complicated things. Emma's pulse spiked. The monitor beeped faster. Marcus glanced at it, and a smile twitched, almost amused. He whispered for Emma to relax. If she panicked, someone might walk in, and they didn't want that. Emma's breath trembled through her nose. She forced her body to stay still, though her mind raced wildly. Marcus leaned closer, voice low and detached. He asked if Emma knew how much easier his life would have been if she stayed asleep. Everyone believed Marcus was devoted, loyal, a perfect husband. They were eating it up. A small laugh escaped him. And then Emma woke up. Emma's eyes burned. She wanted to scream, to fight, anything, but her body refused to obey. Marcus circled to the other side of the bed, pressing a hand against the mattress as he leaned in. He said Emma knew what was funny. They were still praising him. Even now, even when Emma was awake, his voice softened, almost fond. Marcus said they called him a saint. Emma shut her eyes tightly for a moment, then forced them open again. She couldn't lose sight of him. Not now. Marcus told Emma that she was becoming a liability. Emma felt the cold realization settle in her bones. Marcus wasn't panicking. He wasn't desperate. He was calm. Too calm. He had thought about this, planned it. Marcus stepped back inside. He said Emma wasn't supposed to wake up. Emma wasn't supposed to drag this out. He looked toward the door, listening for footsteps. Nothing. Marcus continued, voice light as if discussing something trivial. He said he was transferring Emma in the morning. Facility out of town, quiet place, very private. They would keep Emma heavily sedated. His eyes hardened. No more surprises. The room tilted. Emma's sight wavered. She tried again to move her hand. It barely twitched. Marcus noticed. He said to look at that, trying so hard. Marcus approached Emma again, standing directly beside the IV pole. He touched the bag gently, as if admiring it. He said sedatives were tricky things. Too little and patients woke up. Too much, Marcus shrugged. Accidents happen. Emma felt panic bloom in her chest. Her throat tightened painfully. Marcus leaned down, his face inches from Emma's. He told Emma he warned her. If she tried to ruin everything, he would fix it. Emma's mind raced through every horrible thing she had learned in the last few days. Jessica's taunts, the forged emails, the drained accounts, Marcus's new proposal, the implication about the breaks. Every piece snapped together now, forming one clear truth. Marcus didn't see Emma as a threat. He saw her as unfinished business. Emma's eyes filled with tears she couldn't wipe away. Her breath came out short and shaky. She didn't know if anyone would walk in. She didn't know if Sarah was still on shift. She didn't know if her mother would come back tonight. She didn't know if she would survive these next minutes. Marcus reached out and ran a thumb gently across Emma's cheek. The gesture so tender it made her stomach turn. Marcus whispered that he told everyone he missed Emma. He said it was funny, right? His hand dropped to the IV line. Emma's heart pounded so hard the monitor shrieked in alarm. Marcus didn't flinch. He slowly lifted the tubing between his fingertips. Something shifted outside the room, a faint sound like distant footsteps, but they didn't stop at Emma's door. They faded down the hallway. Marcus exhaled in relief. He said it was good. He would hate for anyone to interrupt them. Emma's lungs tightened. She gathered every ounce of strength left in her body and tried to move her arm. It jerked weakly, just enough to twitch the blanket. Marcus saw it. He smiled. He whispered that Emma was still fighting, just like before the accident. Emma's pulse skyrocketed. Her mind flashed with memory. Rain, headlights, brakes not catching. Marcus shouting behind her earlier that night. Emma screaming his name right before the world spun. The truth washed over Emma in a violent wave. Marcus knew Emma remembered pieces. He feared Emma would remember more. Marcus reached toward the IV connector, fingers brushing the latch. Emma's breath came out in a choke sound, her first real vocal noise since waking. A tiny, strained whimper. Marcus froze, then he leaned close. So close Emma could smell his cologne. Marcus whispered that they should have buried Emma when they had the chance. His hand tightened on the IV line, his fingers curled around the release latch, and he began to pull. Marcus's fingers tightened around the IV latch, and Emma felt the cold slide of fear shoot through her body. She tried to scream, but the sound stuck in her throat. Her chest heaved. Her eyes watered. The monitor blared its alarm in a frantic, high-pitched rhythm, but Marcus didn't back away. He whispered that this was for both of them. Emma would stop suffering, and Marcus would get his life back. Then something shifted. A tiny bump under the blanket. Emma barely felt it happen. Her hand twitched, nudging the small metal recorder Sarah had slipped into her palm. It rolled barely an inch and hit the bed rail. It beeped, a soft, unmistakable chirp. Marcus froze. The blood drained from his face as he stared at the blanket, at the tiny glint of silver that peeked out from underneath the fabric. Marcus dropped the IV tubing, snatching the recorder with shaking hands. He whispered, demanding to know what it was and where Emma got it. He pressed buttons, rewinding. A distorted sound crackled out, his own voice. They should have buried Emma when they had the chance. Another tap, Jessica's voice. Maybe Marcus didn't want a messy divorce. Another Marcus again. Emma was a liability. His fingers spasmed around the device. Marcus whispered at Emma, asking if she recorded him. He called her something cruel. He lifted the recorder as if to smash it. The door burst open. Sarah shouted for Marcus to step away from Emma, charging in with 2 security officers behind her. Marcus spun around, startled, the recorder still in hand. He insisted this wasn't what it looked like, but everything was crumbling fast. Sarah pointed at the IV line still dangling from his fingers. She said Marcus was tampering with Emma's medication. She saw it from the hall. Marcus shouted that it was a lie. One officer stepped closer. He told Marcus to put the device down and move away from the patient. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he did as ordered, slowly lowering his hands. His mask was slipping. Panic trembled beneath his skin. Emma watched every flicker of fear as if her life depended on it. In truth, it did. Sarah rushed to Emma's side, squeezing her shoulder gently. She told Emma it was over. Emma was safe now. But Sarah's voice wavered, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. Sarah straightened and faced the officers. She said there was something they needed to hear, something the hospital already recorded. Marcus's head whipped toward her. He demanded to know what Sarah was talking about. Sarah didn't look at him. She looked at Emma. She told Emma she wasn't as unconscious as Marcus thought. Marcus blinked, confused. He asked, "Continue, 9:40 a.m., continue, 9:46 a.m., to what Sarah meant by that. Sarah said firmly that Emma was semi-conscious at times during her coma. Emma had spoken fragmented words, and because of hospital policy, the entire room was under continuous audio monitoring while Emma was classified as a high-risk patient. Marcus stepped back, his face going pale. He said no, that wasn't possible. There was no way that could be true. Sarah nodded slowly and explained that every word Marcus and Jessica had said in Emma's room was recorded. The funeral planning, the inheritance discussions, the conversations about Emma's accident, all of it was captured. Marcus's mind worked frantically as he shook his head. He insisted this was ridiculous, that Sarah was making things up. There was no way any of that existed. But Sarah stayed steady and calm. She told Marcus that legal would release the audio files in the morning. They had already heard enough to suspend all the medical decisions Marcus had tried to make for Emma. Marcus's face crumpled into something ugly. He shouted that Sarah was lying, that they were all lying to destroy him. Security moved in closer. One officer told Marcus he needed to come with them immediately. Marcus lunged toward the bed as if he could somehow reclaim control of the situation, but the officers grabbed his arms firmly. He struggled against them, shouting at Emma to stop this. He told Emma she was confused. She wasn't thinking clearly. Emma blinked once, slow and deliberate, her answer perfectly clear. Sarah whispered that Emma knew exactly what she was doing. The officers dragged Marcus out of the room, still shouting, still denying everything, still trying desperately to salvage the life he had spent years building out of lies and manipulation. The moment the door shut behind them, Emma sagged back into her pillow, completely exhausted. Her eyes burned with tears. Her breathing trembled. She was safe for now, but her body shook from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Sarah leaned down close, brushing Emma's hair away from her forehead with gentle fingers. Sarah said she was so sorry. She should have acted sooner. She should have trusted her instincts from the very first day she noticed something was wrong. Sarah swallowed hard and promised that she was here now, and they were going to fix everything together. Emma blinked gratefully, the only response she could manage. The next several hours blurred into constant motion. 2 nurses carefully transferred Emma to a secure wing on the other side of the hospital, a place Marcus couldn't access even if he tried. They adjusted her monitoring equipment, checked her IV lines multiple times, and increased surveillance around her room. Sarah stayed close the entire time, hovering protectively over Emma, refusing to leave until she was absolutely sure Emma was stable and secure. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, no longer from heavy sedation, but from sheer emotional exhaustion. She felt safer in this new room than she had in weeks. The air even felt different somehow, lighter, cleaner, less oppressive. But every time Emma closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face twisting into fury as he grabbed the recorder. When morning light finally filtered through the window blinds, a familiar voice rushed through the doorway. It was Patricia. She ran to Emma's side, tears streaming down her face as she cupped her daughter's face in both hands. Patricia said she was so sorry, repeating it over and over. Emma blinked slowly, trying to reassure her mother. Patricia was shaking visibly. She explained that Sarah had called her first thing that morning and told her everything. Those emails Marcus showed her, he had forged them all. Marcus lied to Patricia. He lied about Emma. He lied about everything. Emma blinked again, her eyes softening with understanding. Patricia took a deep breath, steadying herself as much as she could. She said she had heard some of the recordings. She heard Marcus. She heard that woman, Jessica. Patricia's voice broke with a sob. She said she should have protected Emma better. She should have seen who Marcus really was from the beginning. Emma wanted desperately to lift her hand, to touch her mother, to tell her none of this was her fault. But her body still wouldn't quite cooperate. Instead, Emma blamed love and forgiveness. Patricia kissed Emma's forehead tenderly. She promised they were getting justice for Emma, no matter what it took. A quiet knock sounded at the door. 2 detectives entered, wearing plain clothes, their expressions calm but serious. They introduced themselves gently to Patricia and Emma, then spoke with Sarah in the hallway for several minutes. Their voices were low and professional. Emma caught fragments of what they were saying, multiple hours of recordings, clear evidence of intent, obtaining warrant for vehicle inspection, interviewing the other woman involved. Emma felt a fragile spark of hope growing inside her. For the first time since waking up from her coma, someone with real authority believed her story. Someone was fighting for her. Someone powerful enough to actually stop Marcus. Sarah returned a few minutes later and whispered to Emma that the detectives would handle everything from here. Emma didn't have to be alone anymore. Later that afternoon, the police made their move quietly and efficiently. They didn't announce their plans publicly. They didn't want Marcus to know they were coming. They wanted him off balance, trapped, and completely exposed. Emma lay in her hospital bed, listening to her monitor's steady rhythm, waiting anxiously, praying that the next update would be the one she desperately needed. She didn't know that miles away, Marcus was being questioned in a small interrogation room. She didn't know Jessica was already panicking and trying to flee. She didn't know the walls were closing in around them both, built entirely from their own careless words. Emma only knew that justice had finally stepped into the room, and it was headed straight for both of them. Jessica had always prided herself on staying cool under pressure in any situation, but today her hands shook uncontrollably as she threw clothes into a suitcase. She wasn't thinking about outfits or makeup or the next charity gala she had a plan to use to climb another social rung. She was thinking about police, about recordings, about Marcus's unraveling expression as security dragged him away from Emma's hospital bed. Jessica had thought Marcus would keep it together under pressure. She thought he would cover for her, protect her somehow. But she had heard the detectives showed up at the hospital that morning. She heard they seized all the room recordings. Jessica knew the investigation was completely real now, which meant she needed to disappear before anyone knocked on her door. She zipped the suitcase quickly and grabbed her purse, only to freeze when she heard her name being called outside. Someone said Jessica Price. Her blood ran cold. She didn't answer. A voice told her to open the door. They just wanted to ask her some questions. Jessica backed away from the door, trembling. Questions were dangerous. Questions led to answers she wasn't willing to give. Answers Marcus had sworn she would never have to deal with. Jessica grabbed the suitcase and bolted for the fire escape. She didn't get far. A hand clamped firmly around her wrist. She spun around expecting to see police, but instead saw Marcus. But this wasn't the polished, calculated version she knew. This Marcus was frantic, sweaty, wild-eyed. His tie was crooked, his hair a complete mess. His expression a mixture of rage, fear, and betrayal. Marcus hissed at her, asking where she thought she was going. Jessica tried to yank her arm away. She told Marcus to let go because the cops were everywhere. They needed to leave immediately. Marcus asked incredulously if she meant we. He said there was no we anymore. Jessica snapped not to start with that. She reminded Marcus that he pulled her into this mess. He begged her to help him get rid of Emma. Marcus said he told Jessica nothing. He stepped closer, trapping her. Marcus said if the police came for him, he wasn't going down alone. Jessica's breath caught. She asked if Marcus was threatening her. Marcus shouted that Jessica ruined everything. He shoved her against the wall. Marcus said if Jessica had kept her mouth shut in that hospital room, none of this would be happening. Jessica shot back that Marcus was the one who messed up. She said Marcus pushed Emma. He cornered Emma. He couldn't even kill her properly. Marcus slapped his hand against the wall beside Jessica's head, caging her in. He asked if Jessica thought he was the reason this was falling apart. Jessica nodded sharply, eyes wide with fear. She said yes, Marcus was reckless. He always had been. Marcus leaned in close, his voice low and shaking. He told Jessica he fixed the brakes for her. Jessica froze completely. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Marcus whispered that Jessica wanted Emma gone more than he did. Jessica said Emma was in the way. Jessica said she needed Marcus free. Jessica told Marcus to stop. She pleaded that someone could hear them. And someone did hear them. The detectives stepped into the hallway suddenly. Both of them had their badges raised. They told Marcus Richardson and Jessica Price to please step away from each other. Marcus spun around, shock flooding his face. He demanded to know what they were doing there. Jessica pointed at Marcus instantly. She shouted that it was him. Marcus just admitted he sabotaged Emma's brakes. Marcus laughed, a short, unhinged sound. He said Jessica was lying. She was trying to save herself. One detective reached for his handcuffs. He said, "Funny thing, they just heard the entire conversation between them." Marcus's eyes widened in horror. Jessica bolted for the stairwell. She didn't get far before another officer intercepted her. Marcus tried to run too, but there were too many of them surrounding the area. The metal handcuffs snapped around his wrists. The detective said, "Marcus Richardson, you are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, medical coercion, and conspiracy." Jessica screamed as she was cuffed as well. Marcus shouted that they couldn't prove anything. He yelled that they heard him. They couldn't prove anything. Emma couldn't even talk. But Marcus's voice cracked under the weight of his own panic. The detectives didn't answer him. The elevator doors closed, and just like that, the two people who had tried to bury Emma were gone. Back at the hospital, Emma woke to the sound of someone entering quietly. It was Patricia. She carried a stack of papers, a manila folder, and a determination in her eyes Emma had never seen before. Patricia sat beside her daughter, took a shaky breath, and said they arrested Marcus. They arrested both of them. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Patricia opened the manila folder and held up a single sheet. She explained this was everything Marcus had drained from Emma's bank accounts. Another sheet. Patricia said this was proof Marcus refinanced the house behind Emma's back. Another. Patricia held up the sale contract for Emma's business. Marcus had forged Emma's signature. Emma blinked once, twice, letting the tears spill freely. Patricia whispered fiercely that they were getting it back. Every dollar, every piece of Emma's life. Patricia promised she was going to help Emma rebuild it all. Sarah came in next, eyes red from crying. Not sadness, but relief. She pulled up a chair and leaned close. Sarah said she listened to all the recordings, every single one. Sarah said there was something Emma needed to know. Emma blinked slowly. Sarah swallowed and continued. She explained that Emma talked while she was in the coma. Emma's brain wasn't fully asleep. Emma said single words, sometimes sounds. Sarah hesitated. In one of those recordings, she caught something Sarah didn't think Emma had remembered yet. Emma's heart thudded unevenly. Sarah continued softly. Right before Emma's accident, Emma had whispered his name. Emma froze. Her breathing stuttered. Her eyes filled. Sarah whispered that Emma knew. Some part of Emma saw who touched her car. Some part of Emma fought to survive because she refused to let Marcus get away with it. The revelation hit Emma like a shockwave. Memories she didn't know she still carried rippled through her chest. Rain, brakes. Marcus's face in the driveway, his angry words echoing in her head, her whisper, Marcus, right before the world went black. Emma's body hadn't saved her. Her will had. Sarah took Emma's hand gently. She said now that Marcus was arrested, Emma could finally breathe. Another detective entered briefly, nodding respectfully. He told Emma they would be pursuing full charges. The evidence was overwhelming thanks to her. Thanks to Emma, A woman who couldn't move, could barely speak, could only feel terror, but who still fought. Days passed and healing began gradually. Emma regained more movement. Her voice returned in soft whispers. Her therapists were stunned at how fast she progressed. Rage was motivation, hope was fuel, justice was oxygen, and finally, after weeks of silence, Emma spoke her first full sentence to Sarah. She thanked Sarah for believing her. Sarah cried harder than she expected. Rebuilding Emma's life took time, but Emma did it brick by brick. She reclaimed her business. She froze Marcus's accounts. She filed charges for fraud, abuse, and attempted murder. Emma joined support groups, made new friends, and reached out to old ones Marcus had pushed away. She and her mother grew closer than ever. The woman who once lay helpless in a bed now moved through the world with steady steps, carrying scars that didn't weaken her. On the day Emma finally listened to the full hospital recording, she sat alone with the headphones on her ears. She heard Marcus and Jessica laughing about her funeral. She heard them planning her burial outfit. She heard them argue over who would get her grandmother's ring. She heard Marcus whisper to let Emma die. But the most haunting part came from Emma's own voice. Faint and cracked. Marcus, a whisper of warning, a whisper of truth, a whisper of survival. Emma took off the headphones slowly, her heart heavy but steady. She didn't survive because the universe saved her. Emma survived because she refused to let Marcus win, even while unconscious. Evil thrives in silence. Love is proven in action, not flattering lies. And sometimes the person who wants you dead is the one pretending to keep you alive. Emma walked out of that dark chapter with clarity she never had before, and she vowed never to be silent again.